Tessa Beecroft, welcome to the Amateur Rugby Podcast.
Hello.
It's nice to see you. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good. I mean, it's swelteringly hot today, recording on 19th of July, which has provided some, sweat issues. But apart from that, all good.
Yeah, ridiculously hot today.
Yeah. Okay, if you could just give us a quick introduction about yourself and the vitals, please.
So my name is Tessa Beecroft. I am a personal trainer, actually, full-time. I specialise in physical activity for mental well-being. I've been a sports coach for many years and a sports therapist as well. But basically my passion lies in looking at physical activity for mental health, and I'm a very passionate mental health advocate. I'm the founder of a non-profit organisation, Ruck, which raises awareness of mental health specifically within rugby. And that's kind of things in a very quick summary, I guess.
Yeah, awesome. There's a load of good stuff there, which I'm very much into, which we'll dig into. We'll get to Ruck a little bit later. But I understand you've been involved in rugby for a number of years now. I'd just love to hear about your involvement in rugby, what you love about it, the people, some of your experiences. Would be great to hear.
So I've been in love with rugby ever since I saw the New Zealand All Blacks do the haka when I was about 8 years old. Okay. And I've just gone, this is the most amazing sport that has ever existed. I've worked specifically within rugby for the last 10 years as a sports therapist, so working in the physio team for some of my local clubs. I am a qualified rugby coach as well, and I have taught rugby to youth and minis before. Not so much the seniors, because I'm always involved in the physio side of things. But I guess what I like most about being involved in rugby is the kind of family that you build within your teams, and I absolutely love that. I just feel that every time I'm at the rugby club, I belong there, and it's just such a nice feeling to have. And I've been involved in lots of different sports teams, especially growing up. I've always been an active individual, and I've never really had that sense of belonging other than when I've been involved in rugby. So, it's incredibly important to me. But yeah, that's kind of where it all started and where it is now. So
what sort of teams have you been involved with? Whereabouts in the country are you?
So I'm based in Norfolk. In the countryside. My family's been in Norfolk since 1997. We moved over from the Middle East. Growing up in the Middle East, there wasn't too much in terms of sports. It was only when I got to the UK and I kind of got into secondary school that I was joining all the different sports teams. So I was basically in every sports team other than football. So hockey, tennis, netball, all those sorts of things. And I actually did martial arts as well from a very young age. So I've trained in martial arts since I was 11, and I fought competitively in Olympic Taekwondo, so WTF Taekwondo, for a few years, and managed to get some achievements through that, which was pretty awesome. But yeah, anything to do with exercise, physical activity, sports, I'm kind of all over it, really.
Amazing. That Taekwondo stuff sounds impressive. What's You mentioned the love of the team environment in rugby. Is that not quite the case in Taekwondo? Is it more of an individual task?
It is, yeah. Yeah, you're fighting on your own. You're kind of doing, your sparring and your patterns on your own. You train together, obviously, during sessions and stuff, but I've never really found that bond. Even with any sort of martial arts that I've done, it's been always part of a club but never part of a family, if that makes sense. Mm. So it is something that is very individual and solo, and even if you're involved in it from a background sort of perspective, you never really have that sense of belonging. I didn't feel anyway, and it was always just a case of, well, you're somebody who competes for our club, so you're a commodity to our club, rather than we value you. Mm. Because you're awesome and we just like having you here. So I think that's probably why I came away from martial arts, to be perfectly honest. That, and I was getting a little bit too old to keep up with some of the younger martial artists, but
surely not. Okay, well, let's think, going back to the rugby side of things, you always say that if you want to find out the kind of spirit within a club and how people are doing within a club, you should speak to the physio, because basically all the players end up speaking to the physio at some point, and they tend to be a little bit less guarded in that environment. Is that your experience? And if so, could you give me some examples of what that has looked like for you?
Yeah, I mean, people do let their guard down when they come into the physio room. It's probably part of the reason why I started Give a Ruck, to be perfectly honest, because I've been quite open about my own mental health journey, and I've always been honest about how I felt. Players have always come into the room and gone, you know, I heard you talking about this, or I saw this on your social media, and you know what, I felt exactly the same as well. Or, you know, when you felt this, well, is it normal if I feel like this? So it was always, I guess, this safe place where people felt that they could open up, because it is just that one-on-one. But even more so, I guess, because I was so honest about how I was feeling. So it certainly does kind of reflect on the club a little bit, in the sense that, you know, if you're trusted enough within the club, then people are going to speak to you, which is great, and it's a beautiful position to be in. A very, very humbling position to be in as part of the physio team and sports therapy, sort of, you know, having people come and open up to you all the time. But also, I guess, not in a negative sense, but it shows that there needs to be work done outside of physio rooms, so that players feel comfortable doing exactly that, without the need to have this one-on-one sort of situation, or somebody who is just, you know, opening up about how they feel to help start those conversations. So
yeah, okay. And where did your openness come from originally? Have you just always been that way, or there was something happened that made you feel like you wanted to be really open about these things?
Yeah, so no, it definitely hasn't always been that way. I grew up, so my mother's Filipino, and the Filipino culture generally is, you know, it's quite traditional. You don't really talk about how you feel, and you just kind of get on with things. My dad is from the northeast. He's from Sunderland, and again, it's very much that kind of, you know, man's man world, where you kind of just crack on and you don't talk about how you feel. And so growing up, I never talked about my emotions at all. And actually, I didn't even realize I had a mental health problem until I went to a mental health workshop with Mind, and they were talking about all these different symptoms of depression and anxiety. And I was like, oh, wow, I've got all of these. I might need to go and see somebody. And so I started this process of kind of learning about what mental health is, what mental health meant to me, how I was being affected by it, and how I felt, and trying to kind of build a vocabulary around your emotions and how you're feeling is quite difficult when suddenly, you know, you're being asked to express those exact things. And I guess that the turning point for me was when I was employed by an organisation, and they had no idea what mental health was either, and they had no idea how best to support me. And it even got to a point where I was writing a mental health policy for this organisation so that they could best support me. And I just thought, why am I writing a mental health policy for me, for myself? Like, this should already be in place. Like, these are things that should have already been considered and already thought about. And
when are we talking about here, Tessa? What sort of time frame?
So I was diagnosed in 2015, and this was 2016 probably.
Okay, so relatively recent.
Yeah, absolutely. And this was for a sporting organisation as well. So it just showed that there was so much emphasis on this physical aspect of being involved in sports, but there wasn't actually any consideration being paid to the mental health side of things at all. And I had to take time off work. Ultimately, I ended up leaving that job because I just felt that I just couldn't do it anymore. And that was the turning point for me in terms of, right, I need to have a voice about this. I need to try and raise some awareness here, even if it's just to the people that are directly around me. Because at the time, I had no idea that I was going to go on to kind of found Give Ruck and do what I'm doing with that now. It was just a case of, if I can help one person just understand how it is that they're feeling, or at least give them something to relate to, then my experience will have benefited somebody else. And that was really important to me, because I felt really, really, really alone when I was dealing with my anxiety and depression. And I didn't have anybody to talk to at all, other than my doctor. My partner at the time as well, he didn't even understand it. So it was quite a difficult situation for me. And that's when I said, right, I'm going to be as open and honest about this as I possibly can, and allow people to come to me if they need to, and at least act as some sort of voice, I guess.
Yeah, and although time's moved on and there's definitely been a progression around mental health, and especially talking about it and vocalizing it, there's no question about that. There's still a long way to go. And one of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing here is because I think I'm right at the beginning of that journey myself. So having conversations like this with you is really helping me to sort of understand all that stuff as well. Let's go back into the physio room briefly. What were some of those conversations like with the players? Obviously, avoiding details and things like that, but would you say that it was had a really positive impact? And just some examples would be good.
Yeah, so I would say that generally they have had a positive impact. Here in Norfolk, we're a very rural community, and the guys that I was generally working with were guys that were sitting on their own in tractors and being involved in the farming community, which I guess some people will be able to relate to all over the country. Certainly, if you're in a job which means that you're spending lots of time by yourself, like lorry drivers, those sorts of things. So around Norfolk, there is unfortunately a very high statistic of male suicide within the farming community. And I guess some of the positive outcomes that came from being involved in rugby and being involved with these players is that they would come in and they would ask, is it normal? I'm like, well, it just depends what your level of normal is, I guess, for you. If you're feeling that you're struggling, then I would say that no, it isn't normal. And at least I was then able to signpost them to various services, so able to signpost them to their GPs, able to encourage them to go to Mind or speak to the Samaritans or the wellbeing service, so the mental health care team that we've got over here. And that led to them seeking help rather than trying to deal with it on their own and struggling with that for a long period of time. I've had younger players, maybe 17, 18, come up to me and say, you know what, it was really helpful, the information that you gave me. And I've actually spoken to my parents about it, and I've opened up to my family. I've had, senior players come up to me and say, I've been able to talk to my wife about it. I've been able to go to the doctor. I'm on medication now, and that's working for me, which, is great if they're starting to go on that journey of recovery. I've had other players where they've said, you know what, you really helped me in a time of crisis when I felt that it was really, really dark. And, you offered me a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. And I really appreciate that. And that is just so important to me. Like, even me just being there for them as somebody to listen to them and just signpost them to professional support. It's something as simple as that can be life-changing. But yeah, lots of positives from talking about mental health and kind of my own journey, really.
Yeah, I was just going to ask the next question I was going to ask. You kind of just answered, but I'd like to sort of reiterate it again, because it can be a difficult situation if you've not got experience in this kind of area. If somebody does come to you and open up, what are some of the kind of the best things that you can do or actions that you can take to help that person? So
the best thing you can do is give that person time. Time is so valuable to anybody who's struggling with mental health, because all they want to do is be heard. They want to be listened to. And even if you don't fully understand what it is that they're going through, you can at least be there for them just to listen. And from that point, you can then signpost them to their GP. to A&E if they're certainly going through a crisis. If they're really struggling, that's the place that they need to go to, like, immediately.
Mm-hmm.
You can have a list of charity organisations that can provide support. So, you know, Mind Charity, Rethink, Shout, the Samaritans, you can signpost them to there. But what I always say is that if you are not qualified to deal with mental health in the sense of being a counsellor or a psychologist or a doctor or anything like that, you should only ever allow yourself to keep an open door policy, I guess, to a point where you feel comfortable doing so, and to the point where it doesn't sacrifice your own well-being. So it's all very well people saying, yeah, you can come to me, I'm happy to talk to you about this, 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 and this. But if you have an influx of people that want to talk to you all the time, and you're finding it quite emotional, or you're finding it quite a responsibility or a pressure to listen to all these people, then you potentially need to look at your own level of what is actually comfortable. And I think that's really, really important. For me, I kind of know that I'm okay dealing with lots of people talking to me, because I have lots of tools that I've learned and acquired over the years that allows me to filter out some of the more emotional things, and to allow myself to become not detached, but allow myself to look at it from a perspective of somebody who needs to be neutral, I guess. Whereas some people will take it on board and they'll personalize it, and they'll find it quite difficult to let go of the responsibility of caring for this person, or realizing that they're not responsible for helping that person if they're not qualified to do so, I guess.
Mm.
And that's something that's really important to remember. So I guess, one, give that person your time if you're comfortable doing that. Two, listening, making sure you're not trying to problem solve, because that's really important as well. They're not a problem to be fixed, they just want to be heard. And three, knowing your resources so that you can signpost them to relevant services. And if anybody is interested in potentially learning a little bit more about mental health, you know, there is a mental health first aid course that is designed for exactly that, which is really beneficial to a lot of people. So.
Okay, that's amazing advice. Brilliant to hear. Let's dig a little bit more deeper into Give a Ruck now, what it's all about, when it started, and the things that you're trying to achieve with it.
So Give a Ruck started in December 2019. It's a non-profit organisation that was originally designed just to act as an online campaign for local Norfolk rugby clubs to help players, club members, coaches, volunteers talk more openly and honestly about how they were feeling. So it was a case of pulling it away from the physio rooms and bringing it out onto the pitch and off the pitch as well. We launched a video in 2019, which incredibly went viral. And I was then contacted by so many different people, organisations, clubs that wanted to be involved in it, which was absolutely incredible. But also showed that there was a huge need for what we were doing. So it evolved slightly, not just in the sense that we were then working with clubs all across the country, but also in terms of what we were providing. It had to be more than just this online platform that was putting out these key messages. So we developed the Give a Ruck pledge. So the Give a Ruck pledge is divided into three different elements. The first element is to appoint a club ambassador, and that club ambassador helps to share some of our key messages and acts as our point of contact within the rugby club. The second is to ensure that you have at least one mental health first aider at your rugby club. And then the third element is completing the Give a Ruck workshop. And that workshop is specifically designed to help start conversations within the rugby club, talking about what mental health is, how you can look at it from a rugby perspective in terms of players and coaches, how you can potentially look at creating a more positive culture around mental well-being, and what aspects your club might want to look at to show that you're really committed to supporting that positive culture. And it's really important that the training and the workshops, I feel, are attached to anything that we do, because it's all very well having, you know, these messages that go out, but people need to learn it still. And that's how we're going to raise more awareness, by breaking down these sort of stereotypes and the stigma that might be attached to the sport, and encouraging others to develop this empathy and understanding. So yeah, that's kind of
amazing
what we do.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm just thinking around the issue here. So in terms of, certainly on the men's side of rugby clubs, obviously it's quite a macho environment where, you know, you're taught to be tough and hard and all that kind of stuff. But then I think maybe the younger generations are much more likely to be open about talking about mental health, and it's more likely to happen there. What's the uptake that you're seeing on your courses, and what's the spread of people from each individual club?
So mostly the uptake is from male senior teams,
right?
And to be honest, it's not surprising, given that, you know, the statistics at the moment show that women are more open, you know, more willing to seek help and talk openly and honestly about how they're feeling. In terms of the youth and minis, we don't work with younger children, but we have had a few clubs that have contacted us about working with, you know, 14 plus, and, you know, I've worked with the college boys over at Leicester Tigers, and, you know, there's definitely room for that to improve, because I still feel that teenage age group, particularly within the boys, is we're not making any change there at the moment, I don't feel. So we're saying that mental health is talked about more, and, you know, the younger people, that should be starting to come through, but actually it's not actually.
Really?
I feel
okay.
like.
Yeah.
And you know, having talked with some professional players and understanding what things are like with them at the moment, it's really important that we try to educate this younger age group, because they're the ones who are going to be coming through those professional pathways. They're the ones that are going to be going into these high pressure situations, and we want them to be comfortable going into these professional environments and saying, you know what, I'm actually not okay at the moment. Can I have help, please? Because at the moment, all we're doing is we're talking about it, but we're not educating them enough to actually put their hand up. And I think there needs to be a lot more done in that sense, so that the professional game can then catch up with the community rugby clubs. Because at the moment, you know, the professional game, in my opinion, is a little way off in terms of what they need to provide for mental health. And I know we've talked about male teams, but, you know, the ladies teams that I've worked with, yes, okay, ladies are more inclined to talk about how they're feeling, but they're still subject to some pretty harsh stereotypes. You know, there's lots of belief that any female rugby player involved in the sport is gay, and that's not necessarily true. And there needs to be more work that's done in breaking these stereotypes down and understanding how those stereotypes might affect an individual mentally. That needs to be done. Right.
Okay. So what kind of things are you doing within each individual workshop? How long does a workshop last, and what kind of way do you get into these things?
So the workshops normally last about 90 minutes. And some of the things that we cover, for example, are communication. So we talk about communication styles and understanding that, you know, I'm sure there have been, anybody listening to this who's been involved in rugby, I'm sure that you've probably heard somebody say on the pitch, you're not talking enough, we're too quiet, we need to communicate more, we need to talk more. Let's give those instructions. But actually, for somebody who's anxious and somebody who's potentially feeling depressed and struggling, they're not going to want to communicate in the way that you're asking them to communicate. So in these workshops, we talk about the different communication styles, but also the different questions that you can ask to allow that person to communicate with you in a way that they feel comfortable, and also to develop them and their skills as a player. In addition to that, we talk about, you know, knowing your teammates. So the value of that, understanding what's normal for them. So are you, you're going to know who your first team captain is. You're probably going to know who gets sim-binned most often. You're going to know who your top try scorer is. But are you necessarily going to know the player who has a really stressful family life? Are you going to know that player who is always really anxious about game days? Are you going to know the player that's on medication for their mental health? It's about knowing your teammates and understanding what it is that is their level of normal. So if they are struggling, you're at least recognizing a sign or a symptom that potentially they might need support. And those are the things that we talk about in the Give a Ruck workshop.
Amazing. So, I mean, yeah, just thinking back to my rugby playing days, those are some of the closest relationships that I've ever had. But really, none of these conversations that we're talking about now, these kind of little bits and pieces, it never happened. It never happened when I was playing. Not really, anyway, I don't think. So it's good. I think it's really good that this is being brought forward and people are being encouraged to do it. What is the next step for Give a Ruck? What are you hoping to, have you got any targets moving forward? What are you looking to achieve in the next year?
I guess in the next year, it's just about making sure that we have more clubs involved in the pledge. So I'd like obviously with the pandemic, it's been very, very difficult for us to connect with clubs. But I guess the amazing thing that's been pulled out of the pandemic is that clubs have really recognised that supporting the mental health of their teams is hugely important. So there's more clubs that are wanting to be involved in that. And I'm hoping that in the next year, we'll have at least, 40 clubs that are signed up to the pledge. I'd like ultimately, and the overall goal is to ensure that there's a mental health first aider at every rugby club in the country. That's our overall mission aim. And it's about what I'd like to happen is for clubs that are visiting other clubs to recognise Give a Ruck and go, oh yeah, okay, we know what you support, we know what you're about. And even when I was involved at my first club and I launched Give a Ruck, they started coining the phrase Give a Ruck. Like, how are you feeling today? Yeah, I'm all right. Oh, Give a Ruck? And they go, yeah, well, I'm here if you need a chat. And that was just a really beautiful thing. And I'd like it to get to a point where other clubs can communicate with each other in exactly that way. So rather than it just being an internal thing in one club, I'd like them to be able to go, right, okay, we can communicate because we have this shared passion of rugby, but we've also got this at the heart of what we believe in as a club, which would be really cool.
That's an amazing aim. That would be really cool. I completely agree. Now, going back to one of the first things you said about using physical activity for your mental health and wellness, what does that look like for you? Because I do that myself 100%. It's a key part of keeping me, going forward and having a good time. So what does that look like for you?
So I've been on a bit of a journey with my sort of physical activity. So like I said before, when I was really young, I was in every sports team and I've always been very, very active. When I started going through my journey and trying to discover how I was actually feeling, one of the things that led me back to, I guess my journey of recovery was yoga. And I'd never tried yoga before because probably like a lot of people, I thought, oh yeah, it's just lots of people sitting on a mat, not really doing anything. It doesn't seem to be very active. It's not the thing for me because I like to be running around and, being an absolute, nutter 60 minutes a day. Whereas when I discovered yoga, I started to understand fully what mind-body connection actually meant. And understanding what it was that I was doing, which was a huge turning point. Like, I was understanding which muscles were working when I was in certain positions. I was understanding how my breath was being maintained as I was going through activity. I was just creating this awareness of muscular tension. So just through breathing and just trying to relax my shoulders away from the ears and relaxing my jaw, I was understanding that I could actually down-regulate my nervous system, which was going to have a huge impact on rebalancing, you know, my mental well-being. And just that opportunity of slowing things down and understanding through gentle movement that I could change the whole physical aspect of my being was mind-blowing. It was just like, oh my God, incredible. Like, why didn't I know about this before? I've been running at like 90 miles an hour all the time, like, you know, going hell for leather. And all I need to do is just stop and move gently and breathe and understand how I'm actually being through this activity. And it was from that I started to put the foundations back in place, because I felt like I lost a lot of that when I was going through my anxiety and depression. I just felt like I couldn't get involved in sport. I couldn't even walk. I developed a lot of physical symptoms. So my hair started falling out. I started getting nerve damage. I couldn't, you know, my fingertips were becoming numb. I had chronic back pain. I was fatigued constantly. I had really bad headaches. My speech started to go as well. So I was processing these thoughts, but I just couldn't get them out. So my cognitive thinking was being affected as well. And I had no desire because of that to get involved in what I love most, which is fitness and physical activity. And yoga allowed me to look at it from a completely different perspective. Like, I could still move, but I could also move in a way that was benefiting me and helping me to understand that actually I just need to take this moment of recovery and this moment of rest to put the building blocks back into place, so I could then go on to do the other things that I really, really enjoyed. And that was a huge turning point for me. And, you know, fitness is a massive part of my life. I exercise every day pretty much. So to have that back, because I discovered something else that was incredible, is really special.
Amazing. That's really cool. So we'll bring this to a close shortly, but we'll just talk about the Great Rugby Run itself. And obviously I want to support you guys and have you as one of the charities that we're supporting for the Great Rugby Run. And you're hopefully going to come and join me for a leg towards the end. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yes, please.
Awesome. Yeah. So just talking from my point of view, getting out and running, I feel like it's the one point of time in day when I'm like really in the moment, like really there 100% of the time. And you know, if I don't run for 2 or 3 days, which has been the case right now, actually, because I've got a little bit of an injury, like I just start to feel a little bit squirrely and just a little bit tense. So I'm looking forward to getting out there and running every day for the Great Rugby Run, and hopefully we'll make a whole load of cash for you, so we can hopefully, you know, just push Give a Ruck even further forward than it already is. So I hope best of luck with all that. And if people want to get hold of you and find out more about yourself and Give a Ruck, how would they best be able to do that?
So our website is nice and easy. It's www.givearuck.com. All our social media handles are also the same, @GiveARuck. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. So if anybody does feel that they want to get in touch with us, then they can either send us a direct email through the website or a direct message through one of our social media accounts, and we will get back to you as soon as we're able to. But yeah. Perfect.
So listeners, show Tessa that you give a ruck and get in touch. Tessa, this has been an absolute joy. Thank you so much. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you very much. And thank you for everything that you're doing with the Great Rugby Run.